So I have a podcast called Shifting Dimensions to kind of tell you how my mind works. So I've been exploring a lot of what Wu-Sabat talks about, right? So I
Right.
remember I was on YouTube one day and the very first video he posted with you guys, I listened to it and I was like, mind was blown. I was like, these are the things I've been researching, looking into, and some of the questions you guys addressed, especially as it pertained to the Bible. I was like, these are the questions I have, and this is why I do the work that I do. So I went down a rabbit hole, of course, and then I know that put up something one day and just talked about, collaborating and stuff. So we were in contact moving forward. But a
Right.
little bit about me, I'm a spiritual seeker, metaphysical investigator. That's how I like to introduce myself.
Okay.
Um, I grew up Christian. I'm Nigerian, so I have that as a background.
Okay.
And
What part of
I,
Nigeria, if you don't mind me
so
asking?
I'm, yeah, of course, I'm half Yoruba, half
Okay.
Edo.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a
Interesting.
mix.
That's
Yeah.
another person I've met that's Edo as well. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so but yeah, that's just a little bit about me and obviously I have a lot of questions here for you. I have my
Wow.
iPad here.
And where are you based? Where are you located at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm in the DMV. So I'm in Northern Virginia in the
Okay.
United States. Let me clarify that. So I'm 10 minutes outside of Washington, D.C.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah,
Great.
yeah.
So obviously, you know who I am, but just for the
Yes.
listening audience, my name is Seqen. Um, yeah, from OSM Vision, Ask Us Anything, which is a YouTube channel where we literally put ourselves on the front line for people to ask us any questions about what we teach and the culture of Wu-Sabat. So yes, I get so enthusiastic and so happy when I meet new people to talk about Wu-Sabat and yeah, just to share the information. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's again, it's so nice to finally get a chance to sit down and speak with you. And so I have a few questions here, of course. I thought it would be important for us to kind of talk about Wu Sabat. I know everybody who's listening to this, and there will probably be new listeners for those who don't understand what the culture is, what the tradition
Sure,
is. I think it's important to level set. And then I kind of want to talk about some of the things that have come up for me and what I see
hmm
people comment in regards to some doubts that they might have, right? So I
sure,
kind of want to address some of those doubts and then go down into other things. So,
sure.
starting with what is Wu Sabat?
Okay, so the good thing about that question is no one else can define or tell us what Wu-Sabat is but us, because it's an ancient, people will refer to as Africa or African culture. Um, it's been there from the beginning, but it's just that with colonization and certain information being kept sacred, um, a lot of people weren't familiar with it, or they may have come across it, but from a different perspective. So Wu Sabat is the culture of our ancestors who go all the way back to the stars. More specifically, I mean, when we say the stars, we're talking about every constellation, but they identify their home as Orion or the Sirius star constellations, and then obviously came here and then kind of like started our form of life form here on the planet. So because it's a culture, it encompasses everything, which will include our own language, our own, dress, our own foods, our own dance. And when people start to do more research into the scientific aspects of everything in life, it also relates to our tones and our vibration and our frequency, which is separate from other races. Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that. So I noticed that you use the word culture, right?
Mm.
Why do you distinguish between culture and religion?
Right, because religion is it's a construct, it's man-made. Um, Religion actually has a birth date, and we have many, we refer to them as scrolls. Um, People will refer to them as books. We have many scrolls that not only, so when we speak and we say something, we back it up by publications, because that way people can do the research and scrutinize the publication. And so when we say the birth of religion, we actually have an actual fact called the birth of religion, which goes back to when religion was first concocted, which is really literally like 6,000 years ago. That's, 6,000 in the Gregorian calendar. So when you speak to people who practice religions, most people are under the impression when they say reading the Bible or say the Quran or, the Talmud or any of these monotheistic religious books, they have been given an impression that this is the beginning of life, like Genesis being, they say, the beginning, which is not actually accurate. So they will tell you themselves, people that practice religion, scholars in religion, that, it goes back to like 4004, um, when you're dealing with AD. So coming forward, because the the new time starts with, they say, the birth of Jesus, which will be, when you go back 2000 years from today. So when you add this 2000 years from 1 AD plus the 4000 years or 4004, roughly for, what they call in BC or before the Christ or before Christ or before the Christian era, you get a total of 6,000 years. So even the scholars within these religions only take you back to 6,000 years. Now, what is interesting is that when you compare that with what scientists say, or archaeologists, or anthropologists, or people who, they study things from the beginning in terms of fossils and things that are found, they give you dates of millions of years, to say the least. So 6,000 years in comparison to millions of years is quite a small period of time. The reason they quote or stick to the 6,000 years is because the the people we refer to as the Adamites, who are spoken about in the Bible, that people believe is the beginning, or a person called Adam, but it was actually a graftation of these beings 6,000 years ago. This is why they can only go back to 6,000 years ago, you see. So we say culture because religion is limiting, is divisive. It creates a lot of chaos. It creates a lot of wars, because you have people that say you need to believe and do as we do and follow this book from our God or our deity. And if you don't follow or believe as we do, then you're not a part of us. And each of the monotheistic religions subscribes to this. Not only that, even within each one, if you even accept it, there are so many denominations, and each denomination claim something different from the other. So they're continuously split up, and new versions are currently being, even as we speak, being created. So it's a constant, division, and we Wu-Sabat deals with the culture, which is embracing all of humanity.
Thank you for clarifying that because now I want to shift and talk about the master teacher,
Sure.
um, Dr. Malachi Z. York. So when I came across Wu-Sabat's teachings on OSM Vision, of course I went down a rabbit hole. I haven't watched all of the videos, so I'm sure there's a gap in my knowledge, but
Mm-hmm.
I binge listen or binge watched a lot of the videos that you guys put out, and I was like, this makes sense. My
Right.
issue with the Bible is that there were so many gaps that couldn't be filled, and people would either just ignore those gaps or explain it in a way that didn't make sense, right? And for
Right.
the first time, as I listened to Sabat, I was like, you guys are filling in all those gaps. This makes sense, right? So then, of course, when we talk about Dr. Malachi Z. York and the history behind him and what he's currently facing right now,
Mm-hmm.
I did more research, right? I'm like, okay, so how can someone who has helped kind of map out a lot of the hidden knowledge and unknown things, right,
Mm-hmm.
also be accused of certain things? Is there any sort of legitimacy here?
Mm-hmm.
Or can there be smoke without fire, right? So I want you to really address that. Particularly, let me ask the question specifically.
Sure.
With what's going on with Dr. Malachi Z. York,
Mm.
right? what would you say to people who are like, but if he was convicted for these things, there has to be some truth here.
Right. See, that's the thing. When you use words like if, that's not concrete. That's why even, everything we teach with Wu-Sabat, despite the situation with Dr. Malachi Ziyuk himself, we always say, don't believe us, check it out. Do your research and deal with the facts. So it's great that you've taken that approach. And most of what people hear on the internet or in the media is based on hearsay. And we always encourage people that you can't just say, because somebody said this or you heard this, that's what is facts. Because there are facilities for you to be able to go and do the research, even on the case, right? But even before I get into some of the specifics of the case and how you could find out more information, you have to look at and use your own discernment as well as your own kind of like common sense and look at anybody that has ever come to this planet. I mean, anybody, including Jesus, who has this knowledge or wants to uplift people or come with truths. I mean, you can name anyone you can think of, from Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Noble Drew Ali, Yahweh ben Yahweh, as I said, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha. You can name anyone, and they always have this sort of situation where they're accused, lied on, and if possible, imprisoned, and if possible, even unalived. So this is nothing new. Even when you look at, people will say, if he's so great, if he's this, if he's that, why would he be in such a predicament? But if you return that question to say, well, why was Jesus put through what he had to go through? Why did he have to be spat on, put, thorns on his head, and then accused, and then put on the cross and crucified, etc., etc. So that just goes to show you that when people are looking at things, they're not actually looking at it from the practical point of view that you have adverse forces, you have people that benefit from perpetuating the lies. And so there is a system where anyone who tries to go against that in terms of exposure, exposing them, will come across, they will fight back, there will be a conflict, and they will, do their best. So to kind of stop you, even in the religious books, you have what they refer to as prophecies, which are really predictions of certain things that will take place and will happen. And they say things like there will come a time when the truth will be revealed, when people will be liberated. And many of those will just many people will say, oh, this is when the return of Jesus, or Jesus is going to come back, and then you will get redemption and then you will be saved. So if we explore all these things and then start to look at the evidence and look at the facts and say, well, let's look at who on the planet has been able to meet any of that criteria. It's going to become very clear why, the trumped up charges and the lies and the people that have been utilized to try and, di di put Malachi in the situation he's in. And we can even go back to, as I said, Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Anybody you can think of right now has had to go through this. So this is not surprising to us at all, because you have governments that have set up organizations specifically afraid of what they refer to as the coming of the Black Messiah. That's in their own documentation. So Intel Pro, you know, is an organization that was specifically set up to look out for anybody that they refer to as a Black Messiah, that will come along to help and liberate us. And this goes back all the way to even like the times of the biblical story of, Herod and the birth of what they call Jesus, where the same thing was happening, where Herod, being the king, was afraid that this new king that they're talking about is going to come, and he will not be as relevant once this person comes. You see, so he went about trying to unalive all the children, boys that were born, just so that he can make sure that this person doesn't come. And it's a similar story to today. But I'll let you, obviously clarify by, more questions.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for breaking that down because I think the issue I'm having here, right? Because I'm always looking for threads, right?
Mm,
And one thing I appreciate about Wu-Sabat is this philosophy of doing your own research and
mm,
coming to your own understanding or overstanding. I know that's the preferred term. Um, but when I think about the principle of, hey, do research for yourself and figure out if this resonates with you. And then the way they talk about the master teacher as this authoritarian who's like, my way or the highway, or some call him a cult leader, it
mm,
kind of goes against what I kind of think of the archetypes of cult leaders, which is to, hey, this is what I'm saying. This is what
mm-hmm.
it is. You don't need to do any research outside of me. But I think there's a culture of like, figure this out. This is what we're saying. And you do the research and figure out if that makes sense to you. So, with that being said, right, for the people who are listening, who this is their first time listening to, about listening in on a conversation about Wu-Sabat and the master teacher, who is the master teacher? How did Dr. Malachi Z. York become the master teacher? What is the history there?
Sure. So let me just touch on 2 points that you mentioned in leading to your question. So the first one is when I said that you can go and research, you have like when you're dealing with the case specifically, you have like the US justice system has an online system where you can log in and research and see what somebody's like charged for, or what the actual charges are as opposed to the hearsay. um so that's one aspect. The second one is when you say cult, again, you have to remember that with Wu Sabat, because we dissect everything, even words that you're using and the language that's being used, you have to break that down. The word cult, if you research cults and then look at what we are, as I said in the introduction, we are a culture. The word cult is the first part of the word culture. And they looked at our culture, which was outside of the what you would call the status quo of what the Western world, or like the United States government, because obviously that's where he was residing, what they accept and what they don't accept. And they look at something that is different or doesn't, you know, go along with what they say is acceptable, and they will label it a cult. But then if you start to study cults in America and around the world, there haven't been any African American cults as such. Culture, normally, if you look at things like David Koresh, Heaven's Gate, um, they're all Christian groups mainly. And the reason for that is because the Christian doctrine accepts and teaches that it is all right for somebody to die for your sins. And so they actually give you this thing about it's acceptable for Jesus to come and be crucified. And that means that because of that act, that he is now removing your sins from the world. So there's nowhere where we teach, or there's a history, or if there is, any sort of Africans involved, it will normally be Africans who are following a Christian group or influenced by a Christian doctrine. And this is why we say when people actually take the time and do the research, they will start to put things together and say, okay, what is a cult according to what they're calling a cult? And as you said, it's like you'll have a community where most of the time it's gated and you can't go in and out, and you have one leader that dictates everything. And like you say, you either follow my way or take the highway. If anyone did any research or ever visited our land, Tama-Re, Egypt of the West, there was never a gate. There was no anyone could walk in and out. Of course, there was security, just as if you go into a government building or any business building, there is security at the door just to make sure that you're not carrying a bomb, or you're not going to come and harm anybody. So we had something called a pylon, right? A pylon is not a gate, it wasn't closed. It's just that you had security at the side. When you're coming in and out, they will just make sure you're okay. So we've never been a gated community. People have never been held against their will. People could come and go as they like. And we even had celebrations yearly called Savior's Day, um, around about June the 26th, where people from all walks of life, all parts of the world, all races would come. and the officials would, at the Putnam officials, because we were in Putnam County in Georgia, they would actually count the number of people by the way of the cars that were coming through, and they counted, according to their records, in excess of 30,000 or more, 50,000 even perhaps with some reports of people coming, having fun, leaving without any incidents. There was no criminal record or nothing to do with anyone saying they've been abducted against their will. They, held in this place. Nothing about suicide. In fact, there's literally no evidence to support what they will say a cult is. And one of the things that they emphasize with cults is that they commit suicide. They get together and they commit suicide in mass numbers. We have no history of that, in Black organizations. And um, what's ironic is your adversaries saying that people get together in a cult and commit suicide. If they don't like us and want to get rid of us, wouldn't they be happy that we were a cult and we're going to get together and do their job for them? The reality is we've never taught that we're I mean, we've taught that, we are here and we're going to build and be as successful in every, way as possible. But yes, we do have this history tied to our ancestors who are from above. So there is also talk about, extraterrestrials and things like that, where, people can leave here. And even in their religious books, they tell you that there's a place called heaven that you're going to go to once, you get past the tribulations and so forth. So what you'd have to do is challenge people who look at us as a cult, or say, you try to use that word and say, give me the definition of a cult and provide the evidence that supports that we were a cult, because it's a worldwide organization. We have people in all parts of the world: Trinidad, Jamaica, Nigeria, Africa, most parts of Africa, the Caribbeans, um, all over the world. So how does that fit into a people that are in one place in a gated community with some type of dictator? Then when you look at the writings and the readings and the recordings that are actually on YouTube of the master teacher, he never says, I'm the leader, I'm the only one, follow me alone. In fact, he says, walk beside me. Don't walk behind me or walk in front of me. We walk together. I'm like you. You can be like me. And you can speak to any Nuapian other than those who may have been bought or influenced, or they, compromise and working for the other side, that are going to give you false, stories. Of course, we're not saying that we're perfect, right? There may be some incidences or situations between people that has nothing to do with Malachi, just like, because you have to remember Malachi was able to clean up a lot of people who in the Western society may have been having like maybe criminal records, or they were living a particular type of life. And then, just like the Malcolm X story, if you watch that story, how, you may be in a community and you might be living a life of crime, and then you come in to say, Wu-Sabat, it cleans you up. But the people with those types of mentality, if you get any group of people together, there are going to be clashes in personalities and, what I mean, conflict. So there are things that people did which have nothing to do with Malachi, but he gets blamed because he's seen as the head, even though he's never claimed to be the head. So yeah, this is where you're getting those types of misinformation coming from.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I have a couple things to follow up, but I
Sure.
want to make sure that we fully talk about Dr. Malachi York, who
Hmm.
he is,
Right.
and why he's considered the master teacher.
Okay, so I forgot about that. That was the part of your question. So when we say the master teacher, people again misconstrue that because they forget, because like people can be lazy and just, instead of saying the master teacher, they'll say the master. So you have this misconception where people are saying he's not a master, because if it feeds into that narrative you were saying about being a cult leader and tying into like slavery and the slave master, where we say he's the master teacher. That's the full way you should say it, because he is a master at teaching. And how do we know this? Because when you're a teacher and you teach in the way that nobody else teaches, and you're able to bring about information or author a thousand books. And when you author books, it's like it's put out into the public for anyone to read and scrutinize. So he is a master teacher because nobody teaches like him. And we can say, okay, if you don't accept that, well, give us some examples of other teachers and let's see if you compare them to him, if they have achieved what he has achieved in terms of teaching. So he's a master at teaching because when you look at the schools he took us through, most organizations or religious groups or other teachers may be, quite, I would say, averse in one area, like there may be Egyptologists or there may be theologists where they focus on Christianity or, an area, but you never find someone who has been able to cover every single area you can think about. So he took us through the schools of Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Egyptology, Sumerian, extraterrestrial, science, history, name it, he's been able to cover it and publish, many books on these subjects to the point where no scholar can refute the information. So when we say that, we're not just saying it based on, oh, we just say he's the master teacher. We're saying it based on his track record. He speaks all the languages, translates from the original scriptures, um, the oldest ones that are available, and speaks over 19 languages. So when you start to compare him with other people, it is so clear that he is a master teacher. And that's all he says. He says, I am a master teacher. I'm nothing more. I'm not I'm not in terms of the people that try to label him with this title of, you're a cult leader and so forth. He's like, no, I'm a teacher. And throughout over 50 years, you can find recordings on YouTube, videos, audio, where he stood up to the world and said, come and ask me anything to anybody. And for over 30 years, nobody was able to ask him a question he couldn't answer. And this is where we've picked up as his students, as student teachers, where we're like, ask us anything, because that is the formula that he uses. And we don't know anybody else on the internet that is doing that. People will give lectures or prepare presentations and then they deliver it, give sermons and do seminars and all that kind of thing, which is great. But when you watch our lives, or even now, when you hear me speak, this is coming live and direct from me. There's no preparation or like slides or anything like that. So that's what he did. He stood in front of the world and was like, come and ask me anything. And so, yes, we just refer to him as the master teacher because he is the master at teaching. Obviously, there
And
are
of
different levels to him as well, which we can delve into. But yeah,
Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
and I just want to, I think it's important to ask this as a follow-up question because, and you've talked about this many times, right? But
Sure.
we talk about where did Dr. York get his information from, right?
From.
Because that's the big question. And I've heard people ask, oh, who was his teacher, right? Like,
Right.
where is he getting all of this information from?
Absolutely. Now, um, if I ask the question to anyone else on the planet, where do you get your information from? You see, it's like every question that's put to us, we can reverse it and say, where do you get your information from? And it's going to be you study, you research, like if we go, okay, where does the Bible come from? Who says it's what it says in English? Where does English come from? And, so he studied everything on the planet, right? So this is why when he says go and research it, go and check it out, he knows that you're going to find and come to the same conclusion in terms of the facts. Because how else would you be able to confirm what he's saying? But of course, so to answer that question, he read everything on the planet, not only in the translations into English, but as I said, he's a linguist and he read them in the languages as well. So he translated like the cuneiform tablets and he speaks, Arabic fluently, he speaks, Hebrew. So wherever the scholars on the planet today get their information from, to be the so-called authority on whatever topic. You go to university, you go to these places, and you hear all these professors and people that are saying this is what it is. And we're supposed to just accept and take their word for it. But the reality is that when you start to look at, okay, who was here on the planet first? This is not even questionable now. The Africans were here first. Most of the writings on the planet, when you're dealing with whether you want to go to ancient Egypt, ancient Sumerian, wherever you want to go, as far back as you want to go to, the original people are African. They refer to us now as the Homo naledi or the Homo habilis. And so if we were here first and we wrote records and we wrote stuff and we like if you go to Egypt and go to the pyramids, you see writings on the wall. So we are the originators of most of the information on the planet where others came to study from. So when you look at the European, a lot of the times when they start to, talk about how they're superior in terms of their knowledge, they will quote Greeks and Romans. And then the most intelligent of their ancestors of the Greeks all went to Egypt and they studied under, the Egyptian mystery schools and teachings. So when people say, where does he get his information from? It's our information. We were the first people on the planet. It's just that it's been distorted, watered down, and claimed by other people who came after us. And now they're claiming it as if they're the authority on it, which is not the case. So again, if you want to go back to the most ancient people on the planet, you're going to end up everyone tell you how the Egyptians were so great, how smart they were because they built the pyramids, which till today nobody can actually decipher. Egypt is in Africa. And then, and you look at what they were doing, things like, brain surgery. They were, apart from the pyramids lining up with the star constellation of Orion and the fact that the mathematics are so far advanced that till this day, none of their scientists can work out how they were built. You see, so when you say where does it get its information from, that's one aspect. But then you also ask in the religious world, any of the prophets, whether it was, Muhammad or whoever, they were given information by a being. Somebody appeared to them and they will say angels or the angel Gabriel appeared and he gave Muhammad the information. And this is the same throughout all the religions, the monotheistic ones. In fact, every culture would tell you some beings came from somewhere else and they taught them and gave them some information. Even if you look at the Dogon tribe who were, mapping Sirius B before there were any apparatus to know until now. Scientists are baffled. How did they do it? But they will tell you their ancestors came from that constellation and they gave them information. It's the same with Dr. York and us, where we have ancestors who I mentioned at the beginning, who came here first and they speak through us. And you can call it inspiration, you can call it, telepathy, whatever way you want to look at how information is received. But what is actually really interesting is today scientists are accepting that by talking about things like epigenetics and talking about quantum entanglement. And these are higher sciences that deal with the fact that you can receive communication from literally anywhere in the cosmos and you're tied back to your DNA, to your ancestors, wherever they may be, in the cosmos. So it's not just a matter of words. And you go to Africa and tribes will tell you that, information's been passed down to them from generation to generation. Yeah,
Is it also accurate to say that some of the information he has been passed down from his past lives? I know
absolutely.
he's an reincarnate of
Yeah,
thought.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of was, that's what I was saying about Egypt, because when you go
Hmm.
to Egypt and find out most of the literature that's been recorded is by this being called Tehuti. And this is again a classic example of the distortion because Tehuti becomes Thoth. And and in the Greeks, where they say Hermes, Trismegistus, they will take a name and then render it to be a part of their culture or perceived culture. And then now everybody will be talking about Thoth, not knowing that that's the same person as Tahuti. And this being is a being throughout what they call time. Because again, time is a construct because you're only governed by the laws of time on this planet based on the motion of the planet going around the sun. So then if you're not on this planet, how do you govern time? You see, so there are many things that when you start to use common sense, pretty much most of the time, but common sense is one of the most uncommon thing now. So people want evidence and they want you to prove it. And when you start giving evidence and say, go and check it out, or then you reverse it and ask them to prove what they're saying, then you're now a troublemaker. Or, it's like, oh, like they can ask you a million questions and we don't mind. We don't run away from questions. But then when you start to decipher and dissect and ask them questions about what they teach, it falls apart very, very easily because, when someone is using their common sense and doing research, you just know that this doesn't add up. So yeah, that's what happens. Tehuti is a being that has recorded and written most of the information on the planet, which then got borrowed or taught to other people, and they took parts of it, took it back to, to wherever they came from, and then utilize it, but then act like they originated it when they didn't.
Yeah, so many stories like that. So now I want to get into the nature of the truth, right? Because I
Mm,
know that what Wu-Sabat says, and I don't mean to misquote, that you
sure.
guys deal with the truth, not, beliefs, right?
Right.
So one of my favorite quotes from you is that you said, everybody says they want the truth until they get it.
Sure.
So to me, it's what my brain starts to think is like, can anyone really take ownership of what the truth is, right? And be infallible, right? Because when we talk about different perspectives, right? Race, gender, where we grew up, like we all have a different vantage point of if if there's a picture that's supposed to represent the truth, we all have a different vantage point of looking at that picture, right? So we all
Right.
experience the truth in different ways. So I just want to talk a little bit about like
Mm-hmm.
staking the claim on the truth is can we really can Wu Sabat really say that they know
Yes.
the truth? Okay.
Yes. You know why? Because the truth is the truth. It has no allegiance to anybody. It's like if I ask you, do you breathe air right now? You'd say yes, right?
Yeah.
Everyone on the planet breathes air. You can't argue with that. That's the truth. So when we say the truth, we're not saying that you cannot have parts of the truth, but those parts are still the truth. So no matter where you come from or who you are, when you uncover or discover the truth and you bring it and present it to us, we will say, yeah, that's true. We were not going to say it's not the truth because the truth is the truth, you see? And what happens is that people don't focus on how you get to the truth because, like with anything, there's a scientific approach, right? Because anybody can say it's the truth. Okay, what are the mechanisms to establish something to be true? And there is a scientific method, and that's where you look at things like evidence, reason, and experience. So these three tests can establish something to be true or not true. And so we just say in Christianity there are truths. In Islam there are truths. In Judaism there are truths. In Hinduism there are truths. In Buddhism, whatever you look at, in science, in history, there are truths. If you collect all those truths together and put them in one place, that's what Wu-Sabat is saying, the truth. So what we would do is look at, okay, you claim that, I don't know, just take any example. You claim that we all come from, let's say, this one being that you term God. And he took the dust of the ground and he created a man. Then he took a rib from that man and created a woman. Right. How are we going to establish that that is true? Number one, we got to look at the evidence. You refer to this being as a man. A man has gender. That's how you distinguish male from female. So are you saying he has gender? Is and for you to say him, he, because it's always a he all the way throughout. If he has gender and he's a man, that means he has a mother because men on the planet, every man from on the planet comes from a woman. That's a fact. You cannot argue with that. Even if you're saying it's through, IVF or, what I mean? Anything that is not, it's still going to need a woman to bring about men and women on the planet. That's a fact. No one can tell us any other way on the planet right now. So that's just basic. Like, okay, he's a man. So if he's a man, and we know what a man is, has an X and Y chromosome, as opposed to a female that has an XX. All right. So, you ask questions like men have navel or belly, what we call belly buttons, right? And that's because when you're growing in the mother's womb, you're attached by that, they call an umbilical cord, because that's how you get fed and you get the nutrition whilst you're growing. But we start going into the story of, okay, where was this person? How did they come about? And how do they take dust off the ground and create a person? And the more you start to ask questions and you say, you can't create a person from mud because that's what the word says, right? So the minute you start to like kind of like dissect the story, it literally starts to fall apart. And then you start to hear, okay, let's look at this God. What does he do? He's supposed to know everything. He's most intelligent, omnipresent, omnipotent, omnipotent, which basically means he's all powerful, almighty, he's everywhere at the same time, he knows everything. But then you look at his actions through the writings that are recorded, and it doesn't make sense because he doesn't know everything because he's asking questions. He makes mistakes because he says, it grieved me that he made man. He says things like, have no other gods before me. I am a jealous God. He has emotions, and even though they say he can snap his fingers and or wave his hand and create everything, like let there be light and let there be this and let there be that. He's all powerful until you come across a situation where there's this character that just pops out of nowhere called the devil. And you start to say, okay, was God not aware of this character? Like he knows everything. Did he create, or then you hear, oh, he was an angel once. Okay, even then it doesn't make sense. So God created an angel who he knew was going to become a devil, but he still allowed it to happen. And you look at what this devil does, creates chaos on the planet, havoc, wars, diseases, racism. We can go on and on and on, right? But yet God is allowing this to happen. But he can snap his fingers and get rid of it. Why doesn't he do that? See, these are the things that when you start to put their God or Allah or their deities to the test of what they claim, it doesn't make sense. Because why would a loving, caring God not just click his fingers and get rid of all the chaos and all the evil on the planet or get rid of the devil? You see, they will say, oh, because he wants to test you, which doesn't reason out. Because if you already know everything, you don't need to test me. The point of a test is to find out the outcome of whether you've passed or you failed. And he creates a place called hell where you're going to get tortured forever. And you're like, this God is not a nice person, if you want to use that term, because he walks, he talks, he sits on a throne, he gets angry, he creates flood to drown people, turns people into salt. It just goes on and on and on. You see, this is how Wu-Sabat will be able to go, okay, does that sound like truth to you? And it just falls apart. So the truth is the truth. That's why when you go to court in their system, right? The first thing you do is swear. They make you swear on the Bible or whatever beliefs you have. But the words that would definitely be requested of you to say is, do you swear or promise to tell the whole truth, not parts of the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Because when you're dealing with judgment, it's based on evidence. You can't come to court and say, I believe this person stole something of mine or, like attacked me. I believe that. They're going to be like, well, where's the evidence? The evidence will be like, oh, there was a CCTV camera or witnesses, or, there'll be information that will support your claim. And then the judge is in a position of, okay, deducing the evidence and then deliberating. Sometimes you may need a jury to then come up with an outcome or a judgment to say, yes, you're guilty, you go to prison or whatever, or you're not guilty and you're free to go. So, yeah, everything is based on evidence. But when it comes to you scrutinizing these religious books or religious characters or their claims, all of a sudden, it's like don't ask any question because you're blaspheming, you're infidel, all these names you start to get called just because you want to know. You just want to ask questions so that in your mind it's clear. So yeah, truth is based on evidence and facts, findings, and the way you can establish that is who, where, what, why, all of these W words, and then you get to the bottom of the facts.
It's so interesting that we're expected to just take in what people tell us to believe and never question it. And to your
Mm.
point, it's when you question it, there's this like extreme reaction to like like it's blasphemy, you're evil. And
Mm-hmm.
I struggled with that a little bit when I first started my podcast because of the things I was exploring. I was like, oh my gosh, if, you know, my people listen to this, are they going to think I'm like off the rocker or something? But
Yeah.
whatever, we progress nonetheless. So the question I have for you, following what you said about the truth, is okay, if Wu-Sabat is the truth, right?
Mm.
Because you mentioned the fact that, part of the culture is really connecting with our ancestors and like honoring that ancestral knowledge, especially for Black, African people.
Mm.
So if Wu-Sabat is the truth, is it open to everyone, or are you guys mostly focused on the ancestral connection for Black and African people?
Everyone on the planet would tell you everyone comes from Africa. So everyone is inclusive because everyone's roots comes from Africa, even if it's a matter of some of our DNA was then mixed with someone else to produce someone else. But the reality is everyone originated from Africa, and this is not even something that is disputed anymore, you see. So we're very inclusive, and that's why we say, one of our sayings, you can go on our website, unitedsabiansworldwide.com, and you see no one wins the race in racism. Because again, racism was a construct. It's something that came way afterwards because there is only one race, and that would be the African race. Other races came from that by way of the genetics. So we can't be, we're the mother and father of everyone. And that's why even in the scriptures, it tells them, honor your mother and your father so that your days may be longer. And so it's ironic that the people that push racism came from us, but because of what you'd call a love-hate relationship, because they were actually misled. There was a time where, they used to teach, Europeans used to teach that we were black or we were dark skinned because we were cursed. And because they misinterpreted the whole story about Ham. And, because he said cursed be Canaan, who was obviously the son of Ham. But they just looked at the word Ham from the word Ham or Chem, which means black. In fact, most of the words in the Bible, like Cush, Mitzrayim, Ethiopia, they all mean black. So when you start to look at the lineage, of the actual names of the people and who came from them, you'll find out that they all lead to black people anyway. So because of a misinterpretation, I mean, Jehovah Witnesses used to openly teach this until they realized that the curse was not on Ham, but on Canaan, because he was the one that was then cursed with what we call becoming an albino or albino. because of the lack of melanin. And then that ended up progressively to become what we call leprosy, or they cite one of the health scientific words for it is leproma. And when you start to look at that and research it, it's called Hansen's disease. You can hear phonetically Ham's son's disease. So the love-hate relationship is because even though we were referred to as or looked at as being cursed, and they actually used the Ku Klux Klan and certain people use religious quotes to support even the Constitution of America, to support the fact that we are less than men because they felt that they were superior. But as it goes, with scientific research, with more clarity on the stories of the Bible and identifying who canon is or was, it happens to be Europeans or the Caucasians. And so all of a sudden, it was like, oops. So we are actually not superior because even when you look at the whole story with Hitler, that was all based on genetics and race because he was in contact with beings from Pleiades, these Aldebaran, and they were blonde hair, blue eye beings, and they were basically telling him that they were the gods and passing themselves off as being gods and asked him to create a superior race, referred to as the Aryan race, to look in the image and likeness of the Pleiadians. And that's why he went about trying to do that. And unfortunate for him, in 1936, I believe, he shouldn't say I believe, I know. He went to the Olympics and Jesse Owens, a Negroid, literally in competition with his superior being, just in the race, he just left him behind, you see. But I'm saying all that to say that when they started to look into the properties of melanin and what that means and how like people with melanin can live on this planet and they're not harmed by the sun. And all these things started to show that, wow, like actually, we are, even though we're not the ones that, came up with the whole racism thing, we are actually, when you start to look at the evidence, we're the fastest runners, the best boxers, the best golf players, the best footballers, the best singers, the best rappers, scientists, name it. So, of course, there's a love-hate relationship where they would like to be you. They love the fact that we had the nine ether woolly hair and that, our melanin protects us from the harmful nature of the sun, that we're so talented, very creative, and we have something they refer to as soul. They said these are soul people. So you look at James Brown and you start to look at the music that, was predominantly, superior to anything else. It was soul music. And now it's still rap music, or. So I'm saying all that to say that we are embracing our nature is the godly like nature because we're very caring, very compassionate. We allow people into our countries, we share, and then we get tricked. And instead of, you know, being met with the same kindness, we get tricked to the point where they give us Bibles and religious books, but they take the gold, they take the platinum, they take the oil, they take all the things, the cobalt, that make the West so-called advanced and wealthy, you see. So all of this is now starting to turn back around. And if you were on the other side, how would you feel? You thought you were the winner, but you come to find out that actually you're not. And so now there's a dilemma where it's like, the hate comes in. This where things like the police brutality, the racism, the disenfranchising of us in, whether you want to look at it in jobs, whatever, they try to, not let us in. You look at the biggest tech companies, you look at, even the president's prime ministers, name it, they don't, um, yeah, they don't allow us in. And when we do, unfortunately, they feel that we take over. So yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the truth and it's the reality that now people are contending with. You can stop
You
me
know,
anytime because my answers can be very long and
no,
extensive.
I actually appreciate long-winded answers because my interview style is for the person I'm speaking with to get all of their thoughts and fully flush it out. So I don't want to
Right.
interrupt your stream of consciousness.
Thank
Um,
you.
so, at the beginning of our conversation and throughout the conversation, you've weaved in the point of ancestral wisdom, right?
Mm.
And, in what you just talked about now, right? A lot of Black people across the globe, we don't really know who we are, right? We've lost a sense of self, a sense of our connection to our spiritual traditions, right? So
Right.
there's this push and campaign for us to kind of regain ancestral wisdom, right? And one of the traditions I recently started studying, and I also spoke to someone who's in this tradition. It's called the Ifa tradition from
Hmm.
Yoruba land in Nigeria. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I do.
Um,
Yes, I have.
Okay. So the reason I'm bringing that up, right, when it comes to like ancestral wisdom, a journey back to who we are as a people, our strength, our power,
Hmm.
has the master teacher talked about these African spiritual traditions? Are they weaved into Wu-Sabat? Does he have any sort of disclaimers, for example, as it pertains to blood sacrifices, for example?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Um, Through no fault of your own, you said black people. This is another misconception. In
Okay.
Wu-Sabat, we know white people use that term because of the programming over the years. As I said, people refer to black people, white people, and this is where the competition comes in and the racism and so forth. So we recognize that we're not actually black. And it's always important for this to be, you know, clarified for people because some people will actually take offense to you saying that we're not black. But again, Wu-Sabat is based on looking at the facts. Look at yourself in the mirror. Are you black? I mean, I'm looking at you now and I'm looking at myself and I'm looking at the black chairs and clothes and things that we're wearing. And it's a clear distinction between black and brown. So black goes back to this whole, as I said, there's a lot of subliminal programming because everything black was made to be negative, like, blackboard, black sheep, blacklisted, blackboard. You can go on and on and on. And everything associated with black, like even movies, the good guys would wear white, the bad guys would wear black. Everybody wears black to funerals, which is supposed to be, a sad time, and everybody wears white to weddings. And so it's almost like they desecrated the word black and associated it with anything negative or bad. Dracula wears a black cape. Um, and again, that was programming because of this love hate and trying to make you feel inferior to the white because everything white happens to be pristine. You wear white dresses to weddings and everything white is supposed to be bright and all right. So we don't really refer to ourselves as black based on the color. But in all of this light and dark, you go back to the source of creation, as in this character called God, when he said, let there be light. And in Islam, they tell you Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. So this whole racism and distinction between dark and light and black and white is is programming, is a construct. Because if God was in darkness before there was ever light, and that was the state he dwelled in, then that means he liked to be in darkness. Until this day, when you want to be peaceful, calm, and rest and go to sleep, you will turn off all the lights because lights are bright, they're agitating, they show you everything around you. So I'm saying that to say that we have to be very careful that when we're saying black, we're talking about the state before there was light. And that's known as supreme balance, or that state in which we dwelt before we came from that into light. To go to your question, yes, ancestral, they say worship, but we never worshipped anybody. We became those who were worshipped by other races who misinterpreted what we were doing as in as animist, we were taught and understood the values of nature, right? And by nature, we knew that the most powerful source of, you know, energy and that sustains life on this planet was the sun. And we knew the connection between the sun and our melanin, the connection between the sun and crops and farming. Because, in order for things to grow, they need, water, then soil, water, and the sun. And this is why we refer to our ancient um, places as Tama-Re. Ta meaning dealing with, the soil, and Ma or Mu dealing with water, and Re dealing with the sun. These are the three elements that you need to grow and have life. So we used to raise our hands up and give reverence to the sun. We respected the greenery, we respected nature because we knew we were a part of nature and from nature. So what people then called our religion would be animist, or we practice that we were one with nature. We respected the water, we respected the sun, we respected the land, and we respected all like creation, animals, and the different natures of the animals and so forth. So when they came to Egypt and saw the things we were doing, they misinterpreted that as in we're worshiping the sun, we're sun worshippers, because they didn't really understand it. But today, everybody understands that without the sun, this planet wouldn't exist and nobody on it would exist. So, well, anybody on the surface of the planet anyway, the deep waters would exist, and so forth. But the point is that we were very connected to our ancestors and recognize that they didn't, when they crossed over, they didn't stop to exist and they didn't die. They just went back to nature. And we knew that we were still in tune and connected to them. So certain catastrophes took place over time on the planet where different parts of the planet had to be kind of like rebirthed or start all over when there was, say, a tsunami or a meteorite hit that part. And, they show you this in movies all the time. Even now, they're talking about asteroids and, certain meteorites that may hit this planet. And so we didn't have any type of blood sacrifices. We didn't have to give like anything in terms of cut a lock of hair or spill blood or sacrifice animals or do anything to appease anybody for giving reverence or thanks or showing our appreciation for nature. So when you're talking about Efe and Yoruba and Igbo and some of these ancient cultures, that is literally what they were doing. But then you had influences from other cultures, the Hindus, the as I said, the Europeans, the Phoenicians, the Arabs that came and integrated with us, and some of them brought their practices with them, because in their world, um, if you look at the Bible, whether it's the Quran or they always say in sacrifice, spill blood on the altar, and do all of these things to appease their God. So this kind of with colonized when they colonized some of these places, it got mixed with our culture. Even much like today, most people like in Africa are going to be Muslims or Christians and have a white Jesus that they worship with blonde hair, blue eyes. But if you tell them to connect with their ancestors, they may even, what I mean, have a fight with you against doing that. So, yeah, so when you say is it incorporated into Wu-Sabat, Wu-Sabat is the oldest of the cultures. So everything originated from there and then it branched outwards. And this is why we're like, we've been we've gone down certain roads and followed other people's ways, different races. They gave us different forms of, like I said, whether it's Buddhism, Hinduism, Christism, Mohammedanism, Judaism, and we took on board, we took them on board, but they didn't work for us because we're still not like as powerful as we were when we didn't. take on their ways. And we've prayed, we've done it all and it hasn't worked. So we're like, okay, we're gonna give it back. Give it all back. It hasn't worked for us. It may work for you because you're actually in tune with your ancestors. And that's why it's working for you. And now we want to go back to where we started from and be in tune with our ancestors, and let's see if it works. So we've tried everything else. We've tried all your stuff and it hasn't worked. So let's go back to Wu-Sabat, the first language, the first culture, the first everything. And when we do, it works for us. So clearly, that's the way we should be going. You can't water down something and give it back to me from the original, which I had, and now I'm lost because I'm worshiping your ancestors in your image and your likeness, because all of them will have God in their image and their likeness. When they show you Buddha, they'll show you Muhammad is an Arab, they show you Jesus is a Roman or a Greek, is a European. So of course it's not going to work for us. It's like you're trying to communicate with somebody on the wrong telephone number or the wrong frequency. You're dialing the wrong number. You're never going to get through. So we have to dial the number to our ancestors. And of course, they're within us, within our DNA. And we can actually reactivate and revive them through us because we are living entities that connect to them. So that's what Wu-Sabat is really about.
Thank you for saying that because the other person I was talking about that I was speaking to about the Ifa tradition, Dr. Asani Brogan,
Mm,
she says just that she believes that, or she knows, but I can't speak for her, so I'm going to say
yeah,
she believes that um, the reason why a lot of us as a collective are still suffering and not making certain strides and coming together is because we are worshiping someone else's ancestors, right? We need
that's
to
right.
come back to our own traditional spiritual roots and make sure that we are connecting to the right um, beings, right? That can pour into us and give us the knowledge we need in order to advance as a people. But
Absolutely.
the part that threw me off, well, not threw me off, but the part that I was grappling with, which is what I asked you about the blood sacrifice, because within the Ifa tradition and the way she broke it down was that, sometimes when you were speaking to your Orishas, right, you have to, they're not your ancestors. They could be your ancestors, but I think they're above ancestors in terms of the hierarchy.
Hmm.
But when she was saying that when you're speaking to your Orishas, for example, sometimes it's good to offer blood sacrifice, like animal blood sacrifice. And I struggled with
No,
that because I'm like, why do you need to
that's
spill blood?
infiltration. Yeah, you don't.
Mm,
That's what I'm saying about these other influences, and you know, it's no fault of people that are practicing it without knowing, the origins or the history of how that came about. But like you say, why would think about it? Why would they? What would that blood do? It's like the thing about that comes from Christianity with you know, you go to church because they literally practice necromancy, which is drinking the blood of Christ and eating the flesh of Christ. Like that's cannibalism. Why would a spirit need blood? Like for what? You see, so this is what I'm saying that with Wu Sabat, when you start to dissect things, it's like, does that actually make sense? Because they will say most humans have about 6 ounces of blood in them. So if everybody said, this is the blood of Christ, this is the blood of Christ, drink the blood, how much blood does he really have? Do you know what I mean? Like, and for the whole entire world and planet. Um, yeah, so this is again misinformation, but yeah, we definitely recognize and we can do rituals and connect with them. And you can, I mean, you can make some offerings like fruit and veg, with flowers, things that are not harmful to any animal or anything, you see. And that's if you choose to, but because like if you listen to that story of Cain and Abel in the Bible, this is where war and all the bloodshed started from, because they were supposed to present an offering. And because one presented vegetation, it wasn't accepted. And so the one who actually, killed animal and provided that was accepted. And because of the jealousy, Cain goes away and kills Abel and spills his blood. And from that point onwards, you have competition between two people. competition creates wars, because people start to fight over who's better than the other person and claiming territories, and even to the point of sports, football matches, one team against another, boxing, and and then there's an element that once money is introduced, it's a motivation to harm somebody because you're going to get paid for it. You see, so yes, our natural ways of life deals with natural nature, no blood sacrifices, and our people definitely get the power once they start to connect back with their ancestors.
So there's no need for like an energy exchange, no matter the intention. Like if you're offering
Oh, you're
sacrifice
constantly
for,
exchanging energy, and energy is that's something you're always going to do because there's polarities between negative and positive, and
Mhm.
this is what one of the things you're on this planet right now to do is to master energy, to know what energy is and how it affects you and how you can utilize it, how you can and harness it, how you can transform it, how you can utilize it and use it in positive ways. So this is why it's a like the planet at the moment is full of a lot of negative energy, which comes by way of these extraterrestrials and these beings that feed off of negative energy. And this is the churches, the mosques, they constantly generate this negative energy. And that's because they need it to survive. They subsist off of the energy because when you're no longer in the physical form, you can only really subsist of energy, and you have six ether negative energy and you have nine ether positive energy. And it's like the moon and the sun, because the sun is a representation of that physical power or that energy, that ether. And so the moon doesn't have any sun, it doesn't have any light. So it relies on the sun to reflect its light. And it's called non-luminous because it doesn't have any. And when you look at this with humans, especially us African people, again, we use that term for the benefit of those who, you know, like we are saying black African, but really we are Nuwapians or Sabians. Um, in our language, we would just say Musbatu. So I'm saying that to say you have people that have soul and you have people that don't have soul. Soul relates to solar, which is dealing with the sun, deals with the power, and you are a real living sun because you have something called a solar plexus, which is why you're alive right now. And when you breathe on yourself, you feel that heat because you're taking in oxygen, and you're giving off carbon dioxide, right? And carbon is a residue of burning. So that's the burning that keeps you alive, which we call the breath. And others have a lunar plexus. So they don't have that connection with the sun, with soul, with nature. So there's a contrast between the moon and the sun, and we can go into more details about that. But yeah, it's literally about connecting with your ancestors who were known as the Natharu, who they reside on higher vibrations where you can tap into and pull that energy down and utilize it for your benefit once you
Mm,
know how to connect.
yeah. I have one last question for you. I have 1,000 questions for you, but I can't keep you here forever.
It's
So,
okay. I know we scheduled an hour, but I'm happy, to go until you're happy.
yeah,
A
yeah,
nice logical kind of
yeah, of
place.
course. Yeah, no, I won't keep you too much longer, but I have to ask this question. And I know you've addressed it so many different times, and you slightly addressed it here at the beginning of our conversation. And it is a topic about God, right?
Mm,
Because of the indoctrination, right? A lot of people are hyper focused on God, on a God.
mm,
Though my personal knowing that I've known just intuitively is that what we think God is actually not what God is, right?
mm,
However, I do believe, and I'm saying it's a belief right now because I'm still on a journey,
mm,
that there is one unifying higher intelligence. Now, how much that intelligence interferes with our day-to-day life as beings, that's a different story. But I
Mm,
just want to hear your perspective. Like, I know that Wu-Sabat challenges the notion of God because there could be many gods, and to some respect, people say we are gods, right? However, what are your thoughts on this higher
sure.
intelligence?
I
Yeah,
definitely answer the question for you.
okay.
Before I do, this is why we're here to kind of like undo the programming. Because even when someone uses the word God, if I ask them what makes that person a God, right? What are the credentials for someone that you're calling God? Like, what do they do, or what are they supposed to do? Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if you could answer that for me, like even based on what you know. What would you, even if you were just a layperson, like what would you want this titled person to do? What makes them a God, in other words?
So my understanding growing up of what a God is someone who, we can pray to, they answer our prayers, they answer our needs, right? And, because we are sinful beings, this God gives us grace, right? Or they're supposed to, or we could potentially be punished by this God. So this God is a higher being that we can't see, but we know exists, or they tell us exists, and we're supposed to worship this God so that we can achieve some level of salvation, right? That's what my understanding of God was in the
Right.
past.
Okay. Now, if you explored that, you would see that it was very confusing because you don't see them, you don't know. So how do you know they exist? Because someone tells you that they do, and their purpose is to deal with this thing you call sin. So who created sin and what is sin? And they're supposed to, you pray to them, but you don't know if they can hear you or if you receive any response. So by the time you decipher what God is, it literally is something that doesn't exist based on what you're thinking. And it's a figment of a man's imagination. So again, we in Wu-Sabat, we go into the language and break down what God is and where it came from. As you know, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but like it's a German word for gut, or go to the word Gad. And it's literally a description. And in every kind of organization or society, they would start off with this God having a form, some type of form. Even if they say he's a man, then you have to remember whatever environment you're in, you have to be composed of the elements in that environment. So he can't be in an environment where it's not physical, but then you're told he's doing things in a physical way. So, first of all, the word God is a very limiting term because, as you said as well, there can be many gods to many different people and it can mean different things to different people. What we say is everything is energy, ultimately, right? Energy has different forms or levels because energy can be transformed. So if we took a very simple example we use all the time, water can be transformed from a solid state as ice, and that ice can be melted into a liquid form, and that liquid form can also be heated. The molecules can be heated to become steam or vapor, and it will literally disappear, but it still exists. So what we're saying is that in terms of when you start to look at energy, even if you were to use the current scientific breakdowns of hydrogen being the first kind of like element or atom, you go from hydrogen to helium and all the 99 elements of what they've quantified to on the right hand side, let's say, or let's say the left hand side to deal with physical things, which are made up of atoms. But as you start to go beyond the atom and delve into quantum physics and delve into subdividing the smallest element, the atom, to see if there are things that exist outside the realm of what we already know to exist, which is the physical world. We know that there are, but it's just that with with the lack of knowledge, people didn't think they existed. So they just said everything started from hydrogen. But with more technology and technological advancement, you have people like CERN who are smashing atoms to find out what where does everything start from. And as they do this, they start to subdivide the atom to quarks, to biaps, to, and now they're like, there's something that is holding everything together, but we don't know what that is. Even when you're traveling at the speed of light in what they call space or darkness, you can't escape this darkness. And this darkness is what we're calling ether. And there are many levels of ether. And we say ninth to the ninth power of nine is where our ancestors reside in the form of a vibration where they can exist as physical in that dimension as we are here in this one, the same way we can see touch things which have slowed down their vibration and have become more dense. Because when you're going to the other side, this is what people call the spiritual world. And this is what people call when you die, you're going to go to. Because obviously, it's well established that something is keeping you animated right now. The fact that you're able to move, talk, you've got locomotion. And when that time comes where whatever that is leaves you, the physical body stops moving, it stops being animated and it gets cold. Remember, I was saying that we have a live sun. So that sun leaves because the body gets cold. They call it rigor mortis, where you get stiff and then you just got this limp physical body that you then have to bury or cremate or whatever. So whatever it was, if and they've actually weighed people in hospital before they cross over and take a weight, and then when they cross over, they weigh them, and the weight is less because that essence, that soul, that spirit has left. So there's no doubt that something is keeping you alive. So what happens is that we know, remember I said at the beginning that this is our information from our ancestors who Tehuti, one of the most prolific writers of everything on this planet, teaches, and he teaches this doctrine that deals with quantum physics and beyond. So we know that our ancestors are known as the Natharu, who are pure etheric beings. And you have nine levels of just on the lowest vibration, because as I said before, everything's nine to the ninth power of nine. But let's say nine levels coming this way into the physical world. And these are referred to as E1, E2, E3, because that's dealing with ether. And like anything else, for many years, the scientific world who didn't know about this information will say, oh, there's no such thing as ether. So now you have amongst the scientific community, you have those who accept and recognize ether, and you have those who try to dispute it and say nothing like that exists. I know I'm going a long way to answering your question, but we go back to a state of being pure energy beings. And that's referred to as being an Ethereum. But before you get to that stage and then you become a part of one, which we call Pa'ut, or in English, we say the all expanding. So we are all part of the all, and the all is a part of us because there is no separation, even between time, matter, and space. And now scientists are starting to talk about those states where they're called dark energy, dark matter, which are delving into, what we're talking about as nine ether beings, because we're back at a time where nine ether is going to be ruling and is predominant. And the old information and old ways and old things are now basically dissipating. And and this comes with your consciousness. So you have to start to evolve and raise yourself and prepare yourself to being the supreme being that you're supposed to be before you were given misinformation and these watered down, things like religion, which were designed to really keep you trapped and keep you not realizing your potential, not tapping back into, your ability to use more than 10% of your brain, and connecting back with your ancestors who exist on these other realms, these nine realms that go into ether. So the oneness is that when you deal with energy, everything is connected, although at different density levels, you see. So it's down to you, even though you have the potential and the ability to connect to the higher realms of ether, nine ether, if you have been taught that stay here, there's nothing else out here, follow this and follow this book and give your energy and direct your energy by way of prayers or whatever to this person, this being, who ironically it's in their image and likeness because it's called familiar spirits. So you're giving your energy towards this being and they're feeding off of that energy to be more powerful than you and then to keep you suppressed until you wake up out of that spell and you're like, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to channel my energy towards my ancestors, my, like things I want to do for myself because no one else is going to do it for me. You see, so that's why the concept of you are God first, because you have to look into yourself and then connect with others like you, because God said in their books that he made man in his image and his likeness. So when you look on the planet today, the the only person that I can say in terms of, okay, Dr. Malachi Z York is God, right? Even if you want to say other races have their own God in their image and their likeness. Now, we have a God in our image and our likeness that is alive today, living, not someone who's a ghost, because religions are all about ghost worship, and everyone in those books is dead, right? And those are the real universal books of the dead. Every single character in the Bible is dead. Everyone in the Quran is dead. Everyone in the Talmud is dead. So what you're doing is you're feeding dead ghost spells. They say gospel, and they tell you that these beings are alive in the spirit. So all you're doing is channeling your energy to these spirits that are having an adverse or negative effect on you. So you need to stop that and stop worshiping the dead and start to worship the living, which is yourself and your familiar spirits or your family, connecting all the way back to those original beings that are the most intelligent beings and the ones that guide the pen of Malachi. So when we say Malachi, he receives the knowledge by his pen, which is guided by this being known as Yanun, who is an Ethereal being. And they come from a time way outside of our own, and they're far more intelligent. And so they're now at a time where they know how things work in terms of the cycles. And we're now in the what they call the new 24,000 year cycle, because every 24,000 years is when everything is renewed and this new change comes about. And they've sent him, the forces of nature, for him to be the one to come and start to teach this information. So he's the first person to teach about lots of things. So when we were saying about, he's saying, go and check it out. He also said at a point, there will come a time where you're not going to be able to go and check this information based on the Europeans, just because they say it is. Because remember, Adam was given dominion over the planet to name everything 6,000 years ago. So if you want to know anything, you go and look in Webster's or Oxford, or you Google it. And you know that behind these books, the authors, it's everything they say, you just accepted it. But if you challenge that and say, no, look, we were before you, we have our own knowledge, our own records, our own information, which predates yours, and now we are going to go back to that, then the arrogance and, the fight of, you know, they don't want to accept what you're teaching, but it doesn't matter because truth is truth, nature is nature, and whether people like it or not, they have to contend with the truth because they teach you that there's going to come a time when the truth comes and all false things will perish. And that was obviously being said at a time where they thought they were the authority on the truth, and that we were the ones that would be judged because we're cursed because we have dark skin, etc., etc. So now it's like you read Malachi chapter 4, verse 2, it says, this time the Son of Righteousness is going to come with healing in its wings. S-U-N, not S-O-N, son, right? And that's what we're in now, the sun cycle. And those that are going to be healed are those that can receive the sun without being harmed. And unfortunately, others are going to have to go back into the caves or away from the sun because they won't be able to withstand, the heat from the sun, you see. So we're living in a great age known as the great and dreadful day of the Lord, because it's great for some people and it's going to be dreadful for others because this shift has to take place. The dimensional shift, the consciousness shift, the truth versus falsehood or lies shift. It's all about you as a being, whether you want to raise yourself and wake up or stay in a dead state, worshiping dead books, dead people that can't help you. And yeah, so Wu-Sabat is really here to anyone who'd like to know the truth. We're here for them, and yeah, that's what our job is really.
Yeah. One last question. I know I said the last one was the last question, but I think this is the most
We're used to this last question. It's
one
okay.
last question, and I think
Mm.
it's probably the most important question.
Hmm.
And it's what does Dr. York say about why we're here, right? I know that, for example,
Mm.
in the new age, they say that we're here to learn lessons and um, work out karma, and we keep incarnating until we learn the lessons we're supposed to learn so that we can be the beings that don't have to incarnate back into the 3D world.
Mm.
What does Dr. York say about the purpose of this three-dimensional existence that we're currently in?
Sure. It's ironic that you would say the new age because yeah, the rest is dying and decrypted, and now we're basically yeah in the new age, and you have to rise with it. Yes, so you are here to oh, okay, let me go back. So it depends on you as a person. Different people are here for different reasons and to accomplish different things, although as a race collectively, we are also to accomplish things in unison together, right? Just like other races. So yes, there is this thing where you keep reincarnating, or you have up to 24,000 times if you're not here for the first time to learn and accomplish and master and achieve your purpose, and then you move on to the higher realms, and then you keep moving up until you eventually go back to what I said before as the all expanding. So yes, different people are here for different reasons, and it is about mastering this lower realm. This is like the physical realm, the lowest realm in the material world. So you've got to do things that mean you don't have to come back, such as doing something for humanity. Um, you got to leave a mark. You got to change your, say, if you're more negative, you got to change that to be more positive. Um, People term that good and bad, but it's not really good and bad. This is the concept of heaven. You're good, you go to heaven. You're bad, you go to hell. But it's more about you elevating to a point where you can progress in your life, in your development to experience different forms of existence. Because everybody talks about creation, but things have to exist before you can create something from them. You see, so the simplest way to explain that is like you can create a table, but you would need the wood that existed from the trees to create the table. So you can go to different realms and experience a different existence, which will be as natural to you as the one you're experiencing now on this lower three-dimensional world. You see, so it's hard for someone in the 3D world to think about existing in another dimension without a physical body. Because everything you're going to think about, like what do you do? Do you move? Do you walk? Do you eat? What do you do? You're going to relate it to what you know, you see. So it's hard for people that haven't have had an outer body experience or what we call astral projection or being able to like leave their bodysuit. This is a, like a bodysuit, a skin suit, and go and experience those dimensions and come back. Many people have and are able to do so. And so it's about learning like to master this lowest plane, the lowest realm, and then you move on to the other realms until you kind of like go to when you get to a point where you're pure Etherean, which is a pure energy being. Some will have the ability and given leave to be able to just come down in vibration and personify and go back, So these are the stories you hear, like in the Bible, with the angels coming from heaven and so forth. They're able to, dematerialize and materialize at will. Yeah. So yeah, the oneness is possible, and you have to remember that it is one, but at different density levels or different vibrations, and you can tap into all those vibrations if you have the capability. Nine being the highest, dealing with nine ether, but not everyone can have access to nine because some people can only go up to a certain level, and some can go the opposite direction and go down, where they become more like what we would call demons, ghouls, and really not like, very disagreeable beings. Okay?
Yes. Oh, man. I mean, you said so much here that I'm so grateful for, and I'm going to sit with, especially the concept of God, right?
Mm.
The one and everything is energy, but also kind of making the distinction between having a being that's able to guide you and that being your God, right? If we're going to stick to
Hmm.
that concept.
Right.
So, and of course, what you just talked about with the different levels of density, that's one of my favorite topics, but I'm not going to launch into that because that's
Yeah.
another 3 hour conversation.
All
But
right.
this has been so good. This has been so good. And I really appreciate your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so
May,
much.
may I just say one quick thing because of that, what you've just said about God? See, there are different types of gods, right? And when
Hmm.
when when somebody says that they're God, some people have an issue with that because they don't understand what you mean when you say that because they have a concept already in their mind of what they think God is. So you say I'm God, they'll be like, no, you're not. You're not God. But there are different types of gods. In the Bible, there are gods that come down. Like in Genesis chapter 11, it says that God said, let us go down there, in the whole like what they call the Tower of Babel story, right? So gods can come down, or there are many places where God came down. So we're the types of gods that have come down, that we're walking, talking, alive gods. And even in like, Psalms 82:6, it says, you are God. John 10:34. Even Moses was made a god unto the Pharaoh. So if 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 gods can make gods and make gods in their image and likeness, then if I say Dr. York is God and he's made me in his image and his likeness, not just me, but many of us that are, like smaller gods to him, people would be like, no, you can't say that because you're not God. But then you say, okay, can you show me who God is? They can't. So if I say I'm God and you say I'm not, and I say you present God then and you can't, who's the onus on to say who God is? And then, as I said, if you ask, if I knew somebody was God, I would want to ask them questions that I need answers for. And if I can ask him any question and I get all the answers, and I look at the fact of the compassion, the care, the love, which we call unconditional love or divine love, or the sacrifice for truth and for good, and I see that he meets all those things, then how can you tell me that he's not God? Because you can't present your God to me. And what you do present in the form of whether it's Jesus, Muhammad, whatever, Allah, these are beings in the description of their books that have been walking, talking, and they end up either getting crucified or killed or poisoned or something. So, yeah, this is why we say, I know you're trying to round off now. This is why we do say, like, what's your concept of God and what do you know to be God and what does God do? And does God do things that are positive or does he do things that are negative? Certainly, the God of the Bibles and the Quran, he does some very negative and wicked things, which is not what I would look to as, someone I'm going to give that title to, you see.
Yeah. But to your point about people being just uncomfortable is, with you saying, for example, like Dr. York is God, right? Or, he's your
Or
God.
you are goddess, because
Be-
Dr. York comes from a woman anyway, so yeah.
yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah. The question is, because some people are going to take it like the thought process is going to go to, so do you worship Dr. Malachi Z.
Why
York?
why does God need to be worshipped? That's the
Fair
first thing I would
question.
say. Like, why does he need worshiping? Like, why does he need you? Like, people say he needs you to love him. Like, why? Why does he need me to love him? Like, is he like, you know what I mean? Does he need emotion? Is he unstable like that emotionally? We don't worship anybody or anything because we recognize the God in everyone and everything. So it doesn't make sense. So we don't know. We don't worship him. In fact, that whole concept of worshiping is a whole different story, which we don't have time to go into today. But it's really war ship. It's a ship that caused a war that people don't know today. And it's a whole different, as I said, we'll probably explore that if we get the opportunity to speak again another time.
I know we need a part two because I'm with you and I resonate with the why does God need to be loved, worshiped, recognized? That was what I used to struggle with a lot in in
Right.
reading the Bible.